Now, our security services have been both shaken and stirred by this week's report into the GCSB. The Kitteridge report recommends a new law and a beefed-up watchdog to bring about change at the Foreign Intelligence Bureau. My next guest is the man who finished up as director of the GCSB in 2011, Sir Bruce Ferguson. Welcome to the program this morning.
Good morning, Rachel.
I wonder, Sir Bruce, if you could tell us in the first instance why we need to be gathering intelligence in this country.
Well, I think it would be naive of us to think that New Zealand doesn't have threats, potential, real. I guess every nation in the world suffers potential threats. Look at our economic wealth, our economic well-being. It would be relatively easy to actually sabotage that should a nation or an individual actor have the desire to do so. We need to protect against that. There's also just straight nutters out there who have some evil intent. Intelligence is the backbone of how we run things. We just have to know what the potentials are for damage to us.
Can you tell us about any of the successes that the GCSB has had?
No, I can't go into any of the successes, but what I can say is that from my own experience there, the GCSB is actually a very, very good organisation which has done a lot of good for New Zealand, particularly in relationships. Relationships are everything in the world order, working with other nations. One has to have what you'd call street cred. If we weren't able to contribute in our part of the world, we wouldn't be able to garner the information from other nations. They simply wouldn't play with us, so to speak. So we need to be an actor in the entire intelligence field.
Rebecca Kitteridge says it's a great pity that we don't hear about some of the GCSB's successes. And why is it that we don't? Because there are other agencies, and by this I'm talking about MI6 talked about how it was involved in finding safe Gaddafi in the desert in Libya. Why don't we talk about some of our successes?
Well, that's in the end a political decision, but that's the way we've always run in New Zealand. There is a great potential problem with actually disclosing successes, because really that can also give the other side ways and means to find out how we did it. And that is in itself a real problem. We don't want others to know how we may have intercepted them, how we got the information, and indeed what information we got, because that may just make them protect themselves more.
Who are the other side?
The other side is anyone or any nation which may either have evil intent toward New Zealand or may be setting themselves up such that they could act against New Zealand and indeed our allies if indeed the situation ever arose.
Has there been a situation where there's been a terrorist attack planned on New Zealand soil?
I guess the Rainbow Warrior is a classic example.
Have there been others?
To my knowledge, no. But again, I'm not going to go into that, but we may not have been told, but our own information is we were never protected or protecting against a specific terrorist attack on New Zealand soil, apart from the Rainbow Warrior.
Rebecca Kitteridge, in her report, she raised the issue of the way the laws within the GCSB Act are interpreted. And to that end, I'd like to raise the issue of metadata, or information about information, if you like. What we know is that it is illegal for the GCSB to access the communications of New Zealanders, and the Act says it much. It says interceptions are not to target domestic communications. Kitteridge says the GCSB took the view that when someone texts someone or someone phoned someone, that it could access that information and record that information between New Zealanders because it wasn't accessing the content of that communication. Is that right?
That is not correct as far as I am aware, and certainly my time there. The only time, as Rebecca has found out, that New Zealanders were targeted was as a result of a request from another agency. Now, those two agencies who have the legal power to do so, the Security Intelligence Service and the New Zealand Police. The understanding was, right throughout from 2003 until the present, or until last year, that if they asked under a legal warrant for the GCSB's assistance, then the GCSB could provide that assistance. But to my knowledge, the GCSB did not go out on its own to do this.
Well, Rebecca Kitteridge says that they did access metadata. That is one of the areas where she feels that there was a breach of law, that they may have acted illegally, the GCSB. She says that in her report specifically about metadata, and that they didn't feel that they needed a warrant.
And, well, I actually can't recall actually reading that part of Rebecca's report, but I would suggest if it wasn't under a warrant, it would still be under something from the SIS or the New Zealand Police.
She says she found 88 situations where New Zealanders had been potentially illegally spied on. And although she didn't break it down, that is where she did refer to metadata. So information from telecommunications companies, I suspect, through emails, texts and phones, who was speaking with who. So in essence, the GCSB was looking for a web. Who was contacting who via phone and text? Is that a reality? Does that happen within the GCSB?
No, let's make one thing clear. All people and all personnel within the GCSB were very, very clear on what their responsibilities were. Now, Rebecca does make that quite clear, that she said people went out of their way to comply with the law. There was no intent to do what you're suggesting there unless it was under a request from another agency like the SIS or the police. There was absolutely no reason for the GCSB to be doing that. They knew the law, I knew the law, and if it was straight New Zealander against New Zealander, that was illegal. And to my knowledge, that wasn't occurring unless it was under some other aspect working for another agency.
That doesn't seem to have come from the report as my interpretation, with the greatest respect, Sir Bruce. In fact, Rebecca Kitteridge said, and I quote, "There have been many basic documents that I have been simply unable to find." The record keeping she describes as inadequate, and she says essentially that some of the people she spoke to at the GCSB about record keeping, they used the term, and I quote, variable, that essentially the record keeping there was sloppy.
Yeah, I think sloppy is the wrong word. Rebecca was correct. I mean, I have a great admiration for her work and her report. I have, as I told her so, I think it was a very good, in-depth report, well researched. What she found was great difficulty in accessing files. I accept that. I personally didn't, but then I was a director, and if I asked for things, they seemed to appear on my desk. But the whole nature of the organisation was very compartmentalised, and that's what intelligence organisations are. If you don't need to know what's going on with the person next to you, you simply aren't allowed to access it. So
even though you're a director, Sir Bruce, even though you're a director, there could have been illegal spying, but if you didn't need to know, you didn't know. Is that?
No, that's not correct. If I was aware or had any reason to be aware that there was illegal spying going on, I would have stepped in. I was not aware, and we're not talking about illegal spying, we're talking about the potential for. We're talking about that word may. And that's Section 14 of the GCSB Act and its apparent conflict with the SIS Act and the Police Act. Okay. Now, Rachel, you have to understand too, it was not just one person involved in this. This Act itself was formulated in 2001, 2002, enacted in 2003. I did not just sign warrants. They were put up to me. There was a lot of research went in. We had Inspectors General look at them, and Crown Law on occasion looked at these. So in the end, there are a lot of people involved and a lot of confusion, as it turns out, as to the interpretation of the law.
On this program last week, Grant Robertson said when you reported to the Prime Minister, Helen Clark, that at times there were only the two of you in the room. Is that correct?
Oh, indeed. Not only with the Prime Minister, Helen Clark, but Prime Minister John Key. Indeed, in fact, probably on almost all occasions there's only two of us in the room because there was no need for others to be involved.
Did Helen Clark ever raise the issue with you of the legality of what the GCSB was doing?
No. No. Now, and again, with both Prime Ministers, I don't suggest that they should have been in a position that they had a lot on their plates. They had a right to expect that the process, the due process, had occurred through the staff, through the Inspector General, through me as a director in my time there, to give them good advice. If indeed that advice turns out to be not correct after the investigation, then I, amongst others, must take responsibility for that, for the times we were there.
So did Sir Paul Naser, the Inspector General, did he ever question anything about the legality? Did he ever have cause for concern about anything that was going on at the GCSB? In
my time, no. He and I had a good relationship, and when he visited me, we discussed various issues, various things. but specifically he did not raise this issue. He raised wording issues in warrants. He asked us to change things because they weren't quite what should have been said. So he was very particular in what he was doing, but the specific issue of a conflict or potential conflict with Section 14 was not raised with me.
So Sir Paul Naser, John Key, Helen Clark have never raised any of these issues with the GCSB. It sounds, with the greatest respect, Sir Bruce, that at times it's operated as a law unto itself.
Well, no, that's not true. If you read Rebecca's report also, it says that everybody within the GCSB was going out of their way to ensure compliance. She also indicated that compliance was sometimes quite difficult to access as to what really was the compliance, but she reiterated in the report and to me that at no time did she find any single individual working or trying or even thinking about working outside the law.
Given what we now know, do you think the GCSB could do with a greater level of oversight?
Well, it'd be silly for me to say no. Obviously, there has been concerns. I mean, the .com issue, that one issue, had that not occurred, probably none of this review would have occurred. Maybe the review is a very, very good thing. Yes, it does need a better oversight. How the government goes about that, I wouldn't like to suggest, but yes, it does, but not because they were a law unto themselves, in your words, but simply because oversight, and very good controlled oversight, is a good thing.
Sir Bruce Ferguson, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time this morning, though.
Thank you, Rachel.